All right, so the uh, the Raiders played the Chiefs on Sunday. I think we talked about that, but yeah. So obviously, disappointing game. The Chiefs end up taking home the W, 48-9. I think it's everyone knows what happened. It was a blowout. It was not fun for any parties included outside of Chiefs fans. So instead of going into both sides of the ball, whatever it may be, right? Like we usually do, and we talk and we did the preview a little different as well. But Mike had a couple stats that he wanted to throw out. We'll get some back and forth there, and then I have one final question as it relates to the future of the Raiders, and I think that'll be it for us today. So, Micah, you want to share a little bit of notes that aren't great, but notes indeed.
Yeah. So basically, instead of, and I'm not going to say that we're not going to, air out our grievances at some point through this conversation, but instead of sitting here and just complaining to you guys, airing things out, I found a couple stats that we came across. Very interesting stats. If you could guess that it's has nothing to do with anything good for us, but the first one I would like to touch on is going to be in regards to our defense. So this year, the Chiefs have faced two high safeties less than 40% of the time in only two games this season. Week 10 versus the Raiders, 28%. Week 14 versus the Raiders, 24%. The Chiefs scored 41 points in the Week 10 game, 48 in Week 14, compared to an average of 23.8 points a game in the other 11. So they basically doubled their totals against us in the two games we played. And the stark difference is the way that our defense plays their coverages. So, Andrew, I'll kick it to you to start this discussion about this Gus Bradley defense that we were hopeful for and liked, and then right this spot.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because last year, we kind of got credit for giving the kind of that too high safety look to the Chiefs, and felt like we gave them some issues with that. It's like, oh, you guys found the blueprint a little bit for Mahomes, and that's what copycat league defenses have ended up doing. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I really don't have an answer for as to why we're not doing it. I could tell you just from observations why we kind of would shift back into that base. The too high safety look is basically if you're free and you're strong, and they basically are taking each hash, right? And so they'll play over the top, play that cover two look, and kind of take it each half to where it's hard to find those gaps in the defense. So if you thought about breaking up the secondary into thirds, you would have just far left hash, you have a center fielder, and you have the far right hash. So that spreads it out to where it's tough to get over the top from a sideline perspective, but you can still find those in between the numbers, basically, for lack of a better term. So we did that, or we've done that, and we gave Mahomes problems. And what they've always done very well is hit you right over the top, and also within that thread of the numbers. And so that's why teams will do that and kind of force them to basically take those. If you thought of a corner route, take those two corners. I'm not doing a very good job explaining this. If you had like two slots on each side of the ball and they ran corner routes wherever they would end up, right? They're saying, hey, you got to hit over here. So the reason that's been successful against the Chiefs, number one, is because you always have two guys that are just playing over the top, and they can kind of take away some of those deep shots and try to recover. But also you could tell that that's really where the Chiefs, made their money. So they had to change their game plan a little bit with how they attacked teams, and also with them not being on the same page for the majority of this year on offense. It's given them fits because they haven't gotten into good rhythms. And then you think of Kelsey banged up, Hill banged up here and there, and they don't have anyone else outside of those two. So what I have always been worried about running that is number one, if you're going to run a defensive scheme, you have to have the guys to run it, right? So you think of Morig, okay, he can play over the top in that too high. And then it's like, well, is it Abram? Is it Nate Hobbs? Right? It's like, who's going to really do it? So I think personnel has something to do with that. essentially running the two high, and this is probably goes without saying, but if you run the two high and not the cover three, right, to where you don't have three over the top, it's more aggressive. It's a more aggressive approach, and can kind of force them into something, but also it makes it to where you're susceptible for something deep. Where if you've ever watched a Raider game and you're like, you see the corner pass it off on one of the sides and there's no safety there, right? That's when it can be scary. So the Raiders were able to run that pretty well, but also like in the past. But I just don't. I think it's a comfortability thing with communication in the secondary. So you go to that cover three zone, soft cover three zone. They're like, we don't want to get beat too deep. We don't want to get beat too much, whatever, or we're going to jump into man, where it may be. So I don't know if I have the answer. I just think when you look at those two schematically, I think we kind of just go into what's comfortable, and that's our base defense. And so, we also got into certain spots where we ended up running man and playing a little bit more aggressive and didn't have help over the top, because, you look at the game that we played in Vegas, where they just picked us apart. They just kind of sat there and we just ran that soft cover three, and we ran some of that cover two, but it was all zone, and they just picked us apart. So I think the Raiders wanted to get a little bit more aggressive in a man approach. And then also, if we ran zone, we played just a little bit kind of that cover three, where we have three guys that are over the top theoretically, to where we can stop it. So I don't know why they're doing that, or why they didn't do that, or because there's obviously a blueprint, but the blueprint is only a blueprint if you got to have the guys to do it. So I think it's more personnel, which we struggle with personnel at times, and especially in our secondary. So I don't know. I think it's a comfortability thing. I think it's having the guys to play, and it's not just over the top, because I'm obviously focusing on those, the two safeties, or the two corners and a safety, whatever it may be. But it's also the underneath guys, right? Or the backers getting put into, because you can still run cover two, or you can go run a two high safety with man, and you can run it in zone, right? So I think it's, do we have the right guys to run that scheme effectively? And I just don't know if we do, or have the right people to do it. So I don't know. It's not a very good answer. It's just the only observation that I think is that we tried to shoot our bullet when we could, and then at times we got exposed, and we just got very soft, and we also get beaten that way too. So it's kind of a double-edged sword,
Yeah, and that's kind of the angle I was kind of thinking of too, is the personnel side of things. It's one of those things where it's like, it has had success, so you should probably try running it, but if you don't have the right guys to do so, you've basically either got Jonathan Abram back there in coverage, which we've seen is a complete liability, or Dalvin Levitt out there playing safety for him, and it sucks to say, but he's better when it comes to coverage and stuff like that. But it's also Dalvin Levitt. And when you do that, having Jonathan Abram in the box like he is, when we do that cover three, he's almost the best linebacker we have. You know what I mean? If you think about it. So it's like, when you put that second safety back there, like you said, personnel on the linebacker side of things, it's abysmal kind of all the way around. And I will say that I have really liked what we've been seeing from Divine Diablo. He's had his issues in coverage, and he's kind of working through some stuff, but I feel like he is starting to come into his own a little bit. He's playing better. And I think that's just going to come, with repetition and getting in there more. Malcolm Coons at end, he's been playing really well these last two games that he's been able to get in there, which is nice, seeing some promise out of him too. And yeah, it's tough, because I do think they're starting to, and we've been riddled by injury when it comes to our linebackers. Going into this season, we had Morrow. It looked like Javon White was, he was playing really well in preseason before he got hurt. It looked like he was going to be, a great player there, linebacker for us. So it was, with he's been hurt pretty much all year, it seems like. And Littleton's just been so up and down. I mean, he's had times where he's been good, and then most of the time he's not playing well at all. So I think a linebacker is very similar to, kind of the offensive line, which we're going to touch on in a minute, where we have been riddled with injuries to these guys that, we thought were going to be starters. and the people behind them are kind of just like getting thrown into the fire and kind of learning as we go kind of thing. So I think on top of the fact that, they don't necessarily want to put Jonathan Abram back there in coverage. It's hard to have him off of the field in regards to him being, probably the best all around player at linebacker that we almost have right now on a, play to play basis. So yeah, it's shitty when you look at that and say we're the only team that can't play, a good enough cover two to give them fits. But here we are. I mean, it's definitely not the most Raider thing to happen. And it's definitely, such a Raider thing to happen as well.
Yeah, well, both of them are tough, right? And it's like you run if you theoretically, if you're like, okay, we want to run cover two instead of cover three, and let's talk about zone for a second. We're basically saying we want to remove someone from the secondary and bring him up, right, to play in the nickel or whatever it is, and just have those two safeties. And so that exposes you in other ways too, right? And then with the cover three, then it's like, okay, well, we're going to drop it and just play those, thirds. But then you're susceptible for, because the Chiefs are incredible at, kind of those man beaters, right? Where they run you off. They're going to drag Kelsey right in front of your face, and they're going to drag Hill coming the other way, and Hill's going to go up, right? And you're like, well, this corner has to sit on Kelsey or go play Hill, and then they'll beat you, right? So I think there's just like any defense and just like any zone, there's always holes, right? When you look at cover two, those corners are playing. They usually play press, or they'll play just right off the ball, and that helps in the run game. So that helps for run support. Which the Chiefs like to do. They run off of the edge, out of shotgun, whatever. So that helps with run support, but that's when you start, okay, well, if you get RPOs, or if you just get regular, let's just call it 3-4 wide receiver routes where the corners have to be able to run with those outside guys and then be able to drop in to take that crossing route. And that means that safety's got to be responsible. But if they send two guys at that safety so the corner's like, I got to go with that second vertical on the outside, you got to have the backers to take that intermediate crossing route, right? So it's like there's a lot of ways to frame it up. I just think that the Chiefs have done a very good job of adjusting to teams doing that. Now, granted, I think you look at the data and the stats, and you're like, well, maybe we should just stick there, But I think it's hard to find a reason. But I just know that personnel has changed for us, and we haven't been able to really win with anything on that side of the ball at times against this team. So, yeah.
Yeah, and by all accounts, as we've kind of said over the defense has been playing well. They've been playing better than a lot of defenses that we have had the luxury to see over the years from the Raiders side of things. But this is a perfect example of kind of like kind of talking about is being strapped by the personnel to not adjust to things like this and be able to have those different looks and being able to go into different coverages when we need to run this, cover two against a Chiefs team that has struggled against it. So I like our defense in regards to the young players that we have, the talent that we have. We obviously have a lot of holes in spots that are being exposed on a week-to-week basis. But nonetheless, I don't know. It was just an interesting stat that I came across, and it was like, of course that would happen. Of course it would be like this for the Raiders, even though I wanted to not like this. Shout out to a Matrix, but
no, I think it'd be fun to get into this in the off season too, and just break down just different coverages and how it looks. And once again, if you got the dudes, you got the personnel, then you can run whatever you want. And also if you have the pass rush, if you don't have any of that, then you got to be pretty dang disciplined to not give up 40. And we did. So.
Yeah. And I think the Raiders have had, the discipline. I just think that, or not the discipline, sorry, the pass rush. Our pass rush has been, at least from the ends, we've been good at pressures, but we're not like taking the quarterback down. We're not getting a bunch of sacks. It seems like, Max especially is always there. He's a finger away, and he's getting all these quarterback pressures. Leading the NFL, and quarterback pressures or hurries, whatever it is. But he's not really getting a whole lot of sacks. I think all of his sacks have come in within like 2 or 3 games this season. So it's we're getting the pressure, but not enough. We're getting the pressure that's not finalizing into sacks or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, and the last point about this, and we can move off, but I think that's what you've seen Mahomes get back into, peak Mahomes, where at times when he extends plays. So you don't really run man against the Chiefs in general, right? And so if you do, and he extends plays, then good luck. But especially in those zones, right? It's like what we're accounting for when we're talking about who gets what, when to drop off. That's as if it's 1, 2, 3, check, go, right? Where it's 1 read, 2 read, nope, I'm going to go here, and that's 4 or 5 seconds. Not to mention Crosby beats the tackle, Mahomes steps up, extends it, and now people are just in conflict, all across the board. So when you have someone that has a special arm that can really make any throw all the way across the field, then you got to either get to them or have some very disciplined guys to not kind of run into their own chaos and break down. So that's all.
Yeah, that's all it is. That's the simple side of it all. But so going on to the next thing that we have, this stat's a lot more simpler than the one we just put out there. But Alex Leatherwood, Brandon Parker, so now transferring to the offensive line side, I think they're both tied for first in the NFL for the highest pressure rates allowed. And if we didn't already know that the right side of our line was probably the biggest liability we have on the team, that right there, just that stat puts it into perspective for us. So I guess I'll just kind of roll into that one. Our offensive line, like I mentioned, has been riddled with injuries. Going into this season, we thought Richie would be there at guard, who was a big surprise for us when we first brought him in, as far as how well he's played. We had Denzel Good, who can play guard and play tackle, which I think the expectation was that he was going to be a great pairing with Leatherwood because they could, shift in and out if they needed to. It would be someone that was reliable for Leatherwood to learn alongside with his ability to, play both positions. He was out for the year. And so I know that with how bad Alex Leatherwood was playing at tackle, that people were like, put Brandon Parker in. Brandon Parker sucks. And I feel like has always sucked for us. And I've always been upset when he's gotten in there and given the chance to play, because I'm like, this guy sucks. Like, why is he even in there? But when you have someone like Alex Leatherwood, who has been sucking even more, this year at tackle, and you have the idea. So we had all these injuries happen. We had John Simpson, as a backup starting at left guard, and then we had Illuminor come in, and he played pretty well when he came in playing right guard, filling in and whatnot. But I feel like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place at this point, because Leatherwood didn't play well at tackle, right? Illuminor played good at guard when he was playing next to him. But now that they've moved Leatherwood down into guard, they have Parker playing tackle. They can't just replace Leatherwood with Illuminor, right? They can't just put Illuminor back in at guard, because then you're saying like your first round draft pick isn't good enough to play on the offensive line, right? But he played so bad at tackle, you can't move him back out to tackle and essentially take Parker off, because Parker is more of a vet than him. And even though he has been bad as well, it's like, well, do you want bad or possibly worse, if you switch things back up? So I think for our offensive line, it's been so bad in that regard, especially the right side of the line, obviously. But they're stuck in such a shitty position where they can't really change anything up now, because you're damned if you do, damned if you don't in certain regards. So I think that is going to be one of the biggest things that we focus on when it comes to draft and off season. I think it should be, at least. And yeah, I think, finishing out the rest of the season, I think we're just going to have to bite the bullet, deal with what we're dealing with, and pray to the Lord, baby Jesus, that next year we go into a better situation. But the injuries have been rough,
Yeah. And I mean, we dealt with this last year too, with kind of, our offensive line being a revolving door, and it's not fun that it's consistent. But I'm just going to be as simple as I can, because I think there's a lot of different combinations, what we're talking about with factoring in injuries, factoring in rotations, factoring in whatever. But if you looked at the games, I would look at, I would say yards per carry, I would say time of possession, and I would look at third down efficiency. Okay. If I would take those three stats and look at every game and see what the result was of Derek Carr passing wise, what the result was of the game in general, and what the result was as far as like pressures and things like that. Because if you can't run the ball, then you're not taking, then the defense is just going to be like, they're going to throw the ball 45 times. So we're just going to pin our ears back. Okay. If you can't have long and obviously time of possession, third down efficiency, I'll factor in. But if you can't extend drives and tire that defense out, even one more set of plays, right? Then we can't wear them out. We can't wear them out in the run game. You know what I'm saying? So it's like if we're constantly inefficient and we're constantly like going 3 of 13 on third down, and we can't run the ball, right? Then obviously there's no sustained drives. But then the O line has no shot, dude. And I know they're a part of it to all encompassing with running the ball and rushing attack and time of possession, things like that. But if they're always on their heels, and then DC's always on his heels, right? And the good teams that throw the ball that much, that have like are successful because their O lines are stronger. Well, ours aren't. Our O line isn't strong. So, and we talked about our rushing game, and I know that's obviously ideal state where it's like, well, we should just run the ball better and convert on third down, what have you, right? But I just think if you look at those three things, I'd be very curious to see what the result was as far as DC's performance, and we know that correlates to the result of our team traditionally. So I think when you have just a makeshift O-line, it's quick passing, okay, and you got to have a good rushing attack. Just take the pressure off. It's not like you're just going to throw 4-yard out routes every time. But if you have a bad O-line, you have to compensate somehow. Look at the Patriots. I mean, you look at over the years, their O-line has been up and down, but they've morphed the scheme around the weak points of their offense. And so if you don't have, if you got to run a quick passing attack, you got to have dudes that can beat one-on-one coverage. Okay. It's Renfro and Waller when he's healthy. Okay. And then you got to be able to run the ball, and you can't run the ball. And look at Alec Ingold, Josh Jacobs is banged up. Kenyon Drake's out for the year. It's just impossible in a sense. Right. So I know that's just a lot of no does, but like, it's basically, what do you do then if you have a bad O-line or an injury-ridden O-line? Well, maybe let's get in shotgun so he has a little bit more time, and let's just chop him up. And we've done that. When we looked at the games, we've done that, and then we've been able to at least run the ball for a couple first downs, like at least be able to extend drives, take the pressure to where it's not just, guys just pin their ears back and say, good luck, Brandon Parker or Leatherwood or Colton Miller or whatever. So it's terrible, dude. It's just so terrible. And everything has just morphed itself into, we can't get out of our own way. And I don't know, but it starts in the trenches, and it's as simple as it is, even though I just said 900 things. If you can't win up front on either side, good luck. If you can't get to the passer, if you can't stop the rush or move the D-line off the ball to at least get 4 or 5 yards here and there, good luck. Don't matter how many dudes you have, really.
Yeah, right.
Weapons wise.
And what's funny is that there's so many different stats out there that people have for things, and I've seen a few that tell such a different story when it comes to like looking at our offensive line, like that one obviously about those two having the highest pressure rate right in the NFL. There's also a stat out there about DC's time. Like time to pass from snap to release or whatnot. And like he has more time to pass than the average quarterback in the NFL. So that would, sit there and try to entail that our offensive line is doing well and giving him time to throw the ball, But you have people that are like, see, look at this stat. It's not the O-line's fault. It's DC's fault, right? And you have people saying like, it's not DC's fault. He doesn't have an offensive line that's going to block for him. And some people are like, no, it's Josh Jacobs' fault, all this stuff. They're all right. That's the funny thing, is that they literally are all right. And, you can say it's more of one person than the other for whatever reason, but it's such a domino effect, like you said, where, Josh Jacobs can't run the ball if we can't pass, and, they're not afraid of our passing game for whatever reason, or the O-line's not blocking well enough. Our passing game can't get going if they're not afraid. The defense isn't afraid that we're going to run the ball on them, right? Our O line can't get some rest and like help wear out a defense if we're going 3 and out all the time, or whatever it is. It's just such a domino effect for everything. That's like, this is like the pinnacle of like why this is a team sport. Why it's not all on one person or one thing, but they say that to have success, everybody's got to do their job at the same time as well. If you got everybody not doing their job at the same time too, this is what you kind of start to get. So it's just, it's a round table that you can just kind of circle. It's like a lazy Susan. You just get twisted around and around and around forever.